Hello there guys, what is going on? Daniel Childs back here again, another episode of Let's Talk Chelsea, going through some of the latest news around Stamford Bridge, Alphonso Davies being linked with a very unlikely move for the summer. I'll tell you why I think that's very unlikely. Then we'll get into the backlash to Chelsea's very unpopular and quite unlikable CEO and what he's been saying, and Matt Law gave a really damning and I think very good comment on a podcast today about it. And then lastly, Brentford's set-piece coach. Is this going to be one of the key signings that Chelsea are going to make over the next few months? We'll get into that too. Please do hit that like button. Please hit that subscribe button if you're new around here so you don't miss any of the content as we head towards, hopefully, what will be somewhat of an interesting final bit of the season for Chelsea Football Club in 23-24 under Mauricio Pochettino. I think the first place to start is this Alphonso Davies story. It doesn't come from a ridiculous source. It comes from a secret scout. Apparently Chelsea holds serious interest in Bayern's Alphonso Davies. However, they will face competition to sign him. Davies is one of a few that the Blues would like to sign this summer. The reason I want to reference this story is because I think it gets to a broader point and a broader question we have to ask before we do get to the summer transfer window, and kind of what realistically Chelsea are actually going to do this summer rather than what we'd like to happen, and maybe what our perception is of what Chelsea should be doing over what the reality of what they're actually going to do. I think that's very key before we head into this summer. And that's not to say that I'm just going to blindly support everything that happens over the next few months and I'm going to be happy with every single signing. I'm not going to question it. I'm just going to go, everything's wonderful. You know, I'm not like that. But I'm also not, nihilistic. I'm not going to sit here and always go, oh, everything's terrible. But I think it comes from this kind of briefing and the Victor Osimhen stuff and the Nico Williams stuff we spoke about last week and other players too. I just cannot see if the club are going to stick with their current policy. More so, less because Alphonso Davies, of course, still is a youngish player. He's still got years left on his career, but more so with the wages. And this is where it comes to just the reality, the financial reality that the club finds themselves in, which is, of course, part of that is having to sell before June the 30th. We know that reality. We've spoken about that reality. I'm actually pretty confident Chelsea, like they did last year, will find a way around that. But then if they are unwilling to spend big wages, to commit big wages to players beyond a certain cap, whatever it is, you are going to be limited in who you can sign of a top caliber. And Alphonso Davies is one of those players. Maybe he isn't to the same level of reputation he was, especially I remember when he played against Chelsea in the 1920 season. It felt like that kind of year. He was being propped up, and rightly so. Like he of course was involved in Bayern's Champions League winning team and Champions League winning run that year. Maybe it's not to the same level, but he still is a high caliber player with years left. Why would he move to Chelsea? A, if he ain't going to get the wages that he'd be getting paid anywhere at Bayern. B, if he could get paid a similar amount elsewhere. And C, Chelsea are very, 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 very unlikely to have any form of Champions League football. Maybe European football, if we're going to be more sort of cynical and, maybe more realistic, and don't have that much faith that Chelsea will get European football by the end of the season. So all of these things factor into me where I look at a story like this and I do have to question where, this is coming from, and maybe it's being put out there with the intention that, well, Chelsea were ambitious. They did want to sign Victor Osimhen. They did want to sign Alphonso Davies. They did want to sign Pedro Neto. They wanted to sign Nico Williams. But then in the summer, we did what we did last year, and we just signed a bunch of unproven players, some of which could turn out to be Cole Palmer, but others could turn out to be Anugo Chukwu, players who, very much need a lot more seasoning and may have some injury problems of their own. And that's where, I'm coming at this with, to be honest, when I'm looking at the way they're going to be approaching this summer, because I think it's very nice to put stories out there about Alphonso Davies. And it's the question I'm going to have for the long term with Chelsea is, if they want to get back to the top, and this maybe is going to have, it has to alter at some point, because not only are current players going to probably be looking at their wages and thinking, Why aren't I being paid similar to other big clubs? But if Chelsea start winning, either two things going to happen. If Chelsea don't win again and they stay where they are, mid-table, not getting Champions League football, those big players are either going to move on from our current first team, or we're going to be unable to compete with some of the biggest clubs to get those players in, because you aren't going to be offering competitive wages like the other teams. I mean, Liverpool, despite all of the praise they get for their business, have one of the highest wage bills, because at that level that they're competing with, and the correlation between wage bill and success is pretty consistent over recent years in the Premier League and European football. I don't think that's going to change. So when we're talking about some of these big players that people dream of seeing, you've got to factor that in, because, you know, Benzema was talked about over the January window. How realistic was that ever? But it was not only the age thing, I think it was the wages thing too. So we have to factor that in, and it's a sad thing, because I think it's stupid. I do think it's self-defeating. It's not that you break the bank and put yourself into financial ruin to sign players, but there needs to just be a harsh reality check for Chelsea that has to come at some point, where, you know, you can only go so far with the under 100,000 a week bracket with players if you want to buy top class, if you want to actually upgrade your squad. At some point, you're going to have to commit those wages to someone, and maybe that will come if we let Silva, of course, is likely moving on. If we maybe sell Raheem Sterling this summer, then maybe it opens up for one of those players. Let me know your thoughts, because maybe you're a bit more optimistic than I am, but I seriously doubt reports like this. And I just think with the current trajectory Chelsea are on, I think it's just smoke and mirrors. I think it's nice hopium for fans, but whether it's actually going to lead to us seriously buying these players in the summer, I'm not entirely sure. The second thing is there was a lot of outrage about the CEO, Chris Jurasek, the comments that were leaked about him referring to fans as customers, him not being a big football guy. In recent stories, I think the Daily Mail reported it, others did as well, about the employees at Chelsea being quite shocked about his kind of manner. And then I was listening to the London is Blue podcast, which I will link down below. We're going to play a little bit of what Matt Law had to say about this, but it was like nearly an hour conversation, and Matt Law gives so much insight in terms of transfers, the structure of Chelsea, some of the stories he's written, player injuries, player futures and transfers and all of that stuff. So please go and listen and support London is Blue pod. But I thought what he had to say about this situation was absolutely spot on about Jurasek, about the current ownership, about why they face so much scrutiny, why so many fans feel disconnected with the club, and why he is such a perfect symptom of that issue right now.
I am extremely worried about what I hear about this guy, because I don't hear anything that tells me that he cares about what the fans think, about what the fans want, or about the culture of Chelsea Football Club and football in England. That is my big worry. I have personally emailed Chris Jurasek to ask for an interview, to give him the opportunity to talk to the fans. I did this 6 months ago. I didn't even get a reply. I didn't even get a thanks but no thanks, or we've got your email. Literally zilch. People might say I don't deserve a reply, but I will tell you that is very unusual.
I think if you're someone that's very supportive and, you know, wants to be positive about the current regime, I think you find it very difficult to dismiss comments like this. I mean, maybe you are someone that looks at football in a very consumery way and you don't really see yourself as a supporter, and you don't really care if people at that level are treating the average match-going supporter like dirt, basically, or just like consumers. I mean, that's your prerogative, that's your opinion, fair enough. But I think the point that Matt Law makes is there has been absolutely no effort, no understanding, no respect, no humility within this ownership. And that is something that strikes to the very core of the problem. And if you aren't getting results on the pitch, if fans are not stupid, fans are not, you can't gaslight fans. You know, Chelsea fans, I've continued to say this, it's not unfair for fans to look at the amount that has been spent, some of the comments that have been made by people high up in this ownership about what happened before they arrived, see the level of disruption, upheaval, the sackings, the squad turnover, the lack of results, us being in mid-table, seeing clubs with fewer resources than us get better and actually finish above us in the Premier League and be doing things that we'd like to be doing, and expect fans to just kind of shrug and go, that's okay. And it speaks to the decision making. It links back, you know, if this is your CEO, if this is kind of the person who's going to front a lot of things and talk about a lot of things, it reflects the potential and very likely season ticket increase this summer. It reflects the lack of support for away coaches that was taken away, subsidy that was taken away at the very start of the season, which was a very negative moment, I think, for the current ownership, and, you know, really put a lot of fans' backs up, as rightly so. And you can't just treat football fans like consumers and customers, because I think, again, as Matt Law rightly dissects, what customer would go the length and breadth of the country to support the club? What supporter, if you're an international fan, would wake up at absolutely insane times and potentially, you know, live with sleep deprivation for a couple of days just to watch Chelsea and spend hard-earned money and treat the club like a religion? I've always said this, you know, when these people come in, and it's not, I want to make this clear, it's not his job to be the most dedicated Chelsea fan, to know everything about Chelsea, to be someone who runs out there all the time and says the most perfect thing about Chelsea. I don't want him to be something he's not. He's there for a business purpose, and I want him to be the best in class in that. But then also have a real appreciation of what English football is, or what just football is, and what it means to supporters, and why you can't treat it like McDonald's, like Apple, you know, where people are customers. In some ways, there is that kind of brand loyalty, but it's just nowhere close to the loyalty people have to their football clubs. And I think that's why so many people rightly have a red flag and look at this current ownership and have so much questions and feeling like they just don't have much understanding of what they've walked into. The final thing is something we spoke about last week. Bernardo Cueva, the set-piece coach, Chelsea are set to hire him. David Ornstein broke this story. Matt Laws reported on it as well. I just want to quickly say before we wrap up, I think this is a really important appointment, and I do think this is something that cannot be just swept under the rug. And, you know, why are we taking the lead of Brentford? Why are we copying a team that we should be nowhere near in the league? You know, it flies in the face of, you know, when we look at, say, Arsenal, one of the best teams in the league at the moment, how effective they are at set pieces, how effective previous Chelsea teams were at set pieces. Set pieces are an important part of the game, defensively and offensively, and Chelsea have been horrendous at them for some time. Defensively this season, absolutely under Pochettino, but offensively too, I don't think we make enough of them. So if Liverpool 2 years ago, there was so much mockery when Liverpool, I believe it was a throw-in coach, came in, and people, you know, usual suspects in the media were kind of throwing their hands up going, what is this new modern stuff around, you know, football? It's, you know, the game's gone, all that crap. And actually over the course of a season and what you've seen from Liverpool, from set pieces and from throw-ins and the way they've evolved, it's hard to argue that them looking at the game in new ways hasn't, you know, benefited them in a substantial way. So I hope this does. I think it is absolutely in conjunction with buying profiles of players who are going to be better in those moments than maybe we have in the past. But I do think we have players who can be dominant in those moments and can be coached in that way. So whether Pochettino was intimately involved in it or not, I think it's the right decision. But that is it for today's show. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and I will see you again very soon. All the best.